How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video here on the channel, and in today's video we are going to be talking again about my C55 AMG, and in particular what makes it different from a standard C-Class. Now, thank you all very much for tuning into today's video. If you are new to the channel, definitely check out all my other videos and subscribe if you like what you see. I do all sorts of stuff on go-karts, just engineering, design, cars in general, and in particular, my personal car here, my C55 AMG. Now, today's video, like I said, we're going to be comparing and contrasting this car to a standard C-Class. And when I introduced this car back to the channel a few weeks ago in a video talking about how it's now my daily driver again, someone mentioned that it would be really cool to do a video to mention all of the differing points that make this car different from a standard non-AMG Mercedes C-Class sedan. Now, that really got me thinking, because to the naked eye, or to any normal non-car enthusiastic person, I guess, this car seems like just another standard Mercedes C-Class. But upon doing some research and digging a little deeper, this car is actually quite different. I mean, I knew how different it was already because I've owned the car for quite a while, but I did a little more research and found just how much more different this car is, and there's a lot of smaller things that you may not notice right away. Now, this is a very important fact because it could play a very big role in if you want to buy this car, or just things like that, if you're in the market for it, or if you're just curious to learn a little bit more about this car, or if you already own one, about your car. So what I did here was I have my little booklet, and I mainly use this for different video ideas. But what I did was I went through and I wrote down all of the differing points or notable points that make this car stand out from a normal C-Class. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I broke it down into different categories. The first being, which in my opinion is the most important, is performance. And then we'll talk about aesthetics, exterior aesthetics, and then finally interior aesthetics. So like I just mentioned, this car is very much similar to a standard C-Class. It shares a lot of same features, a lot of the same shapes. It looks pretty much the same, minus a few, different points that, a very either observant person would only notice, or someone who's really interested in cars, or in particular these cars. But before we talk about some, the specific points on the car, we'll talk about just the platform that this car was made on. So obviously this car is made on the W203 chassis, and the W203 chassis, if I'm not mistaken, I believe came out in the year 2000 or 2001, one of the two, and it went all the way until 2007. So 6 or 7 years passed, and so there's quite a while for production of the standard W203 chassis, which is just this body style of C-Class with the rounded headlights and the kind of the triangular shaped tail lights. And even though this W203 chassis was made for that long of time, the C55 in particular was only made for a very short period of time. It was only made for 2 years. They introduced it in 2005. Well, they might have introduced it before 2005, so 2004, but it was made, the two model years that you will find this car in are 2005 and 2006. And this car in particular is a 2006. Now, on top of that, because the year was so short for the production time of this car, because what happened was the W203 came out in the early 2000s. They came out with the C230 AMG, which is the AMG version of this body style before. It had a supercharged V6. And they made that for a few years, stopped making it to ramp up, the design and production for this car to compete better with the E46 M3 at the time. And by the time this car was made for 2 years, they were already preparing for the new W204 chassis body style, and then that's when the C63 came out in 2008. So it's a actually, believe it or not, it is a very rare car. And in particular, based on what I found online, is only about 1,200 of these cars were imported into the United States between those years. Now, obviously that number is going to be different from that, because some cars were wrecked, Some cars are imported, exported. You know, I don't know if these cars are allowed to be imported. I don't know what the rules are, but you know, basically in those 2 years, only 1,200 were imported into the US. Now that we've talked about just the platform of the C55 in general, let's go ahead and jump right in to the most important part, in my opinion, which is the performance. So first and foremost, obviously the biggest thing that you're gonna say, duh, what makes this car different from a normal C-Class is this baby sitting right under the hood here. Now what I'm going to do in certain areas of the video where it's applicable, ideally what I would have liked to done is have a non-AMG C230 or C-Class next to it and then my car so I can do a quick compare so you guys can see. But instead I'll just throw up some pictures in the applicable moments where I'm talking about that feature. So jumping right in, obviously the biggest differing point by far for this car from any other standard C-Class is the engine. The C55 was the only C-Class of this body style to be offered with a V8 engine. Now in particular, the V8 in this car is the M113 V8, and it is used widely in other AMG and, believe it or not, non-AMG models that still used V8s. I think the E550 and all the other 550 variants use a very similar version of this engine, except maybe some of the internals might be slightly different. Now the biggest differing point that makes this engine different from other M113s or just other Mercedes engines in general is the fact for what AMG is known for is hand building their engines. One engine builder for the whole process from very beginning to the end. And in particular, my engine builder, as I mentioned previously, was Pascal Pankratz. Now, I don't know if I said that right, but that's my best pronunciation. On every AMG engine, there is always a plaque that displays the engine builder and has AMG's logo in the middle there. But because I have this aftermarket airbox here from Rentec, my plaque is gone, but I will splice in a clip of my stock airbox, which is sitting over in my garage. So quintessentially, that is the biggest point for this car, is that it has a hand-built V8 engine, produced 362 horsepower and 360 foot-pounds of torque from the factory stock. This car has had quite a few different modifications, so I'm probably at slightly around 415 at the crank and right around 400 foot-pounds of torque. I haven't had it dynoed in a while, but that's based on the last time I dynoed it after all the modifications were done was where I was at. So we're a good amount over stock, and so this car is definitely very quick. So because this engine is so different from all other non-AMG and previous AMG models for this body style, all of the supporting components up in the front here, such as the cooling and things like that, are going to be different in order to support this engine, this monstrous V8 up in the front here. And it's pretty cool when you get an AMG like this compared to a normal C-Class, knowing the fact that you have one of those quality hand-built engines underneath your car. And like I said in my reliability video a while ago, this engine is one of the most reliable and robust parts of the car, and part of that, probably the big reason why, is because there's such time and quality care taken into building these things and making sure they're built and put together the right way. So the next thing that I'm going to be talking about as far as powertrain and performance goes is the part you can't really see. It's underneath the car, behind the engine, is the transmission. Now, as you've seen if you watched my previous video, I just actually finished fixing the transmission on this car. I had a conductor plate issue, but the moral of the story is this transmission in this car is actually shared with a lot of other Mercedes cars, non-AMG and AMG cars as well. This car has the 722.6 transmission. Mercedes, when this car was going to be released, it was a hot topic if they were going to upgrade the transmission or leave their standard 5-speed 722.6 that they had been using for quite some time now. I believe they debuted that 722.6 back in the late 90s and early 2000s. But even though this transmission is shared with a lot of other, Mercedes models and non-AMG models, It is still, I believe, internally different. I mean, it makes sense. A lot more power. You got to be able to put that power, transfer that from, you know, rotational motion this way to, you know, rotational motion to the drive shaft and all the different gear settings. So I believe all the internals, all the solenoids, the circuitry is definitely upgraded from a standard non-AMG 722.6 transmission. And on top of that, and I'll get into this in the later part of the video, in this model you have the option with the paddle shifters. Now that is not an option in a standard C-Class. You have a comfort and a sport mode, and you can still change the gears with the Tiptronic gear selector down there, but you do not have the paddle shifters, and you do not have a less automated, I should say, manual mode to shift in. So the next thing, as far as performance differences go between this car and a standard C-Class, are your brakes. AMGs, this is one of the easiest ways to spot a fake AMG from a real AMG is by looking at the brakes, because AMG always uses quality brakes on their cars. They're all Brembos. In particular, this car has larger rotors. I don't know the exact size off the top of my head, but they are larger diameter than a standard, even sport model C230. And the brake calipers are a 4-piston Brembo setup, and I'm not sure, I know the calipers are smaller on the non-AMG, but I'm not sure if they're Brembo as well, or if these are a special kind of Brembo brakes. But basically the whole setup is a little bit larger, which makes sense because you've got to stop, you need more stopping power to match up with the more horsepower the car has. And then in the back you have still larger rotor diameter with 2-piston Brembos in the rear. These are non-drilled rotors, so they're still ventilated. They just don't have that cross-drill like performance race look to them, which is something I'll probably be upgrading in the future, is getting drilled rotors in the back for when I need to change those. But the whole braking system is different. I'm not sure, it's kind of hard to do research and find how different some of the components are. I mean, I guess I could really get into it and look at part numbers, but I presume if the, you know, brake calipers and the rotors are different, then a lot of the supporting components like the master cylinder and the brake lines would be different as well. So the next thing as far as performance goes that differentiates this car from a standard C-Class is the suspension setup. Now the car utilizes different coil springs and different shocks to account for the more performance-oriented driving that this car was designed to you know, be driven in. So if you threw in, you know, your standard springs and shocks from a standard C-Class, it probably wouldn't perform as well. And believe it or not, I actually had a regular C-Class before this car, and you can definitely tell how much stiffer the ride is in this car than compared to a normal C-Class. Granted, that also has to do with, you know, the profile of tires you have and you know, a few different things, but overall you can definitely tell the suspension in this car is a lot firmer, and there's definitely not as much body roll in a normal C-Class, where in my old C-Class I described it as, you know, kind of like driving on a cloud, you know, designed for comfort. But you can definitely tell when driving this car that it is not a comfort oriented car. It's a harsh ride. I mean, even the difference between my wife's Cruze, Chevy Cruze, and this car is astonishingly different. If we drive on the same road with the same potholes, this ride, it feels like you're driving, you know, on a dirt gravel road, whereas, you know, in her car it's like you're driving on a cloud. So the suspension setup is completely different. AMG, you know, branded springs, shocks, different sway bars, stiffer sway bars for less body roll, and high G cornering and things like that. And I believe the shocks, the different shocks in this car actually change up the damping, so the damping settings are different than a standard C-Class, which is to be expected since this car is designed to be for track use and autocross use. You know, you need different damping settings than just your everyday driving. And it was hard to tell online, but the last part of the suspension that I was trying to see if there was a difference of, but I really didn't find any clear differences. Like I said, I guess I could have researched the part number and really gone far into it. But based on when I have had the wheels off the car in the past, the control arms look slightly different than a standard C-Class, and they do have the AMG branding on it. So I believe the control arms and just the whole overall suspension setup with the uprights to support the larger brakes is just all different from your standard C-Class. And in sum, as far as suspension goes, the overall ride height is actually a lot lower than your standard C-Class. And another point that I should mention is the springs and shocks are much stiffer, not just for performance driving, but to support the extra weight that this car has from having that monstrous V8 in the front here, which brings me into my next point. So this car, the curb weight of this car, now I can't remember if curb weight is including all fluids and everything, but the curb weight for this car is 3,540 pounds. And the curb weight for a standard C230 is 3,405 pounds. So more than 100-pound difference between the two cars. Hence why you need the extra stiff springs and shocks in the front to support the extra weight. And I would say, I would place my money on that most of the weight, extra weight in the C55 is up front due to the extra 4 cylinders or 2 cylinders you have, depending on what C-Class model you have. That is what adds to the extra weight, is just the beefier engine and all of the extra supporting components to go with it. And one last thing I actually want to mention as far as performance differences go is the car just in general has a lot of different componentry specifically for AMG's performance division. So a lot of different things will be branded AMG when you're looking around the car. And in particular, one thing that a lot of people might not notice upon first glance is underneath the car here, you can see there's actually a heat sink for the rear diff here, and it's got the AMG branding on it. So there's a lot of small little areas around the car where you'll see AMG's different branding and products in areas where you don't really expect to see them, and that's all throughout the car. So more cooling because the car produces more power, more heat, so you need more cooling, and just many different areas you'll see small little things to improve the performance of the car. So that pretty much wraps up the performance differences between the C55 and a standard Mercedes C-Class. Now I'm going to go ahead and jump into the aesthetic differences. So as far as aesthetics go, I thought I'd start at the front and go to the rear here, but it turns out that the front of the car actually has the largest aesthetic difference of the whole car when compared to a normal C-Class. Now, that has largely and probably solely due to the fact of the different engine that they used for this car. Now, it might take a very observant person to notice, or if you're just really into cars and you notice things easily like that, this car actually has a not significantly, but it does have a noticeably larger and longer front end than a normal C-Class. Now, since a normal C-Class either has a V6 or an inline 4, the amount of cylinders doesn't extend nearly as far forward as with this car. So when AMG actually came out with this car, they took their normal W203 chassis and actually extended the frame rails of the car by about 6 or 8 inches, somewhere around there, to account for the larger engine and the larger radiator needed to go with the car. And because of that, what they wanted to do, instead of having to make all new body panels just for this car in particular, they actually robbed the front end of this car from the CLK. When you have these cars next to each other side by side, this car and a standard C-Class, you will definitely notice that the front end is noticeably longer. So you can actually swap out the fenders from a C-Class, a CLK, a hood from a CLK, and a front bumper and headlights from a CLK. That's just how it worked. I guess that's what worked for AMG at the time when they wanted to make this car and needed to have it, the car needed to have a little bit longer of a front end, which is pretty cool because, it makes it easier to find parts if you ever, that gets dinged, or if you need a new hood, anything like that. And funny story, actually a buddy of mine he has a C55, and I was actually going to buy his car before I bought this one. And he was in a few of my vlogs previously, but he actually recently swapped on CLK 63 Black Series front fenders onto his car. Now, it isn't a perfect fit because of some of the trim and how it lines up here in the back, but because this car has the CLK front end, he was able to put those extra wide, beefy fender flares, or fenders on the front here with the extra flares. And it looks really cool, and it makes the car look menacing. And to go with that, he also added the CLK 63 Black Series front bumper and a special hood to go with it. So it's really cool that this car secretly has a CLK front end, and you can mix and match parts from that model of car for whatever reason you might need them. So another key point to notice how this car differs from a standard C-Class is actually how the hood opens, believe it or not. With a standard C-Class, the grille remains attached to the hood when you rise it up. But when you open this car's hood, the grille actually remains with the front bumper. Now, I know I've opened the hood many times, but just to show you guys again, I'll go ahead and open the hood. So you can see that most of the grille still stays down with the car, or with the front bumper. The only part of the grille that actually goes up with the hood is this little chrome piece right here. So just a little small difference that shows that this is actually a CLK hood and front end compared to a W203 C-Class front end. Now, to go along with the longer hood and the longer fenders, the car actually has the same CLK taillights, so you can get CLK taillights for this car. But another thing that's different, and that is actually unique to this car only, is the front bumper. Now, it has the same general shape as the CLK, but the grille shapes and the inserts at the bottom is unique to this car only. Now, the design for the front end came from the CLK and actually the SL and the C55 AMG, with the special shaped grille inserts down below and the fog lights. Now, this is the part that differs a lot from the C230 Sport is the way this grille is shaped. The C230 Sport, from my understanding, is a little bit more pointed at the ends, and it doesn't have perfectly circular fog lights, whereas the C55, the fog lights are a perfect circular shape. And I just love this front end. It's really cool with the grills and the inserts like that, and I always drive the car with the fog lights on. I think it just looks really cool at night. It's one of my favorite features of the car. And it's also really cool, you can kind of see through the grill there and see the heat exchanger and the condenser and things like that. Now, the next noticeable difference from this car from a standard C-Class are the wheels that come with the car. Now, granted, the wheels that I have currently are aftermarket wheels, but the wheels that came on the C55 in stock form were special to the C55, and I believe the CLK 55 as well. But no non-AMG C-Classes use these wheels. They were special wheels from AMG, and they utilized their iconic double 5-spoke design, and it's kind of the same overall shape as these wheels, different contours and stuff, but it's double 5-spoke all around, and they all came in a silver finish. If you see any with black wheels, those are definitely aftermarket. And finally, going towards the rear of the car here, as far as aesthetics go, the C230 Sport kind of shared this similar design with this car, but the side skirts, the front bumper, the lower part on the corner here, and then the side skirts, and then leading into the rear bumper kind of have this special angled sporty look to it. So it's not technically solely isolated for the C55, but it is something that not all C-Classes share, is this kind of specially shaped side skirt and then rear bumper in the back here. And finally, the last aesthetic feature that differs is the quad exhaust. The C55 is the only C-Class of the W203 body style that utilizes a quad tip exhaust. The C230, which is the previous gen AMG for this body style, actually used only a single-sided dual tip exhaust. So that pretty much wraps up all of the exterior aesthetic differences between this car and a standard C-Class. So let's go ahead and jump on into the interior, and I'll show you guys all the different points in there as well. So one of the first points that you notice that differ this car from a standard C-Class are the gauges as far as interior goes. And this is one of my favorite features of the car because it's such a clean, sporty, and elegant look all in one package here. And it's one of the things that you want to look good because every time you're driving the car, you're looking at the gauges. They're right in front of you. So it's really cool. These gauges are special to the C55. This is the only AMG that actually has these specifically shaped gauges. So it differs from the standard C-Class in that the font is different. This kind of has a more sporty font to go along with the AMG logo, and then it's got the V8 right there and the tack gauge. And then this car has black outer edges, outer circles with a white inner circle, and it lights up white with the red when the car is on at night with the lights on. So very sporty gauges, clean, classy, and elegant look. I love it. So that's the first point as far as interior goes that makes this car different. So the second point as far as interior goes, I kind of already touched on a little while ago, are the paddle shifters here and the steering wheel in the car. So this car, because it has the special version of the 722.6 to be mated with the the V8 in the front, it has the paddle shift option for the 5-speed transmission. Now the other C230 Sport has a similar shaped steering wheel, the same black kind of 3-spoke design with the 8 buttons and stuff, but it doesn't share the paddle shifters and or these little plus minus signs on each side to show you that this is indeed the side for a downshift and that is the side for an upshift. And leading into the next point, so I kind of already again talked about this in the performance part of the video, but this car, let me refocus the camera, this car has a special M mode. Now no, not like BMW M mode, but just manual mode. You can see here that it's got a C/S mode for comfort or sport, and then particularly manual mode. So I will talk about that more probably in a performance review of this car and how it drives, but no other C-Class shares that manual mode. It's usually comfort or sport, and some have like a winter mode as well. And finally, the last but probably biggest difference between this car and a standard C-Class as far as interior goes are the materials that the door sills are made out of and the seats. Now the C55, because it's technically the more expensive option for the car, comes with a premium leather option. So the leather in this car is actually a Napa leather, and you had two options for the C55 as far as color goes. The most common option, and my personal favorite as far as leather color, is the black, and you get the special white contrast stitching along all of the edges there where the different leather parts meet on the different seats and panels and things like that. Then the other option you had was actually kind of like a off-white, almost cream colored interior, still same Napa leather, but it was obviously a lot lighter colored interior. So if you didn't like the black, you could always go with that, but they are definitely harder to find as far as the used car market goes. I would say probably 80% of the C55s that you would find will have a black interior with this silver insert, and you can also get the silver inserts replaced with a black it's not real veneer wood, but like a black / maple colored veneer in the center here. As far as You know, so it's got the different Napa high quality leather. You know, it's really nice leather, it's soft to touch, whereas the standard C-Class kind of has this, I don't even think it's real leather in the standard C-Class. I think it's actually just vinyl, and it's kind of got this bubbly texture to it, and it's not my favorite, but the Napa leather is very smooth, doesn't have that bubbly feel. The inserts here have the holes in the middle for the heated seats. But it's a very nice feel, and actually, you know, this car is 12 years old now. The leather has held up extremely well. Obviously, there's some creasing in the side bolstering here on the lower part of the seat, but that's to be expected. So the leather is a lot different, and in particular also in the C55, along with the Napa leather, you get these Alcantara inserts on the top parts of the seat, in the back there as well. So on both sides of the seat, you get the premium Alcantara inserts to go along with your leather. And the contrast stitching again continues on to the door panel here. So leading on from the leather, another big differing point, one of my favorite parts again of the interior are the seats that you get with this car. Now they are completely different seats from the standard C-Class. Really beefy side bolstering. Like, I mean, you can tell when you sit in this car that the seats hug you like no other, you know, C-Class. Like, it's designed for performance driving because of how beefy these side bolsterings are on the top of the seat and the bottom down here as well. It really hugs you and feels like a performance oriented seat while still being comfortable at the same time. It's a really nice blend of both features. And on top of the side bolstering, of course, you get the AMG, I know it's not really in focus, but you get the AMG insignia on the center of the seat there. And last little quirk of the interior goes, you get a special AMG door sill panel and AMG carpeted floor mats. So little differences, but overall the seats and the leather really set this car apart from your standard C-Class. Alright guys, I think that's going to wrap up this video talking about all the key differences for the C55 from your standard Mercedes W203 body style C-Class. Now, of course, if you have any questions about the car or any of the topics I mentioned in this video, or anything I might have missed that you know that differs this car, you know, feel free to comment below. I'd be happy to get some input, learn some new things that I might not have, you know, known about this car. And of course, I'm happy to answer your questions if you're looking to buy one of these and have any questions about them whatsoever. This video is kind of going along with my goal here of wanting to produce more videos with this car since it is my daily driver. So if you guys have any more ideas, of course, for different videos to produce with the C55 here, things that you want to see, definitely feel free to comment below. Thank you to the previous guy that left the idea for this video. It made for some really good content, and I actually learned a few things about the car. But yeah, I'm looking to produce as many videos as I can to help people either looking to buy one or that already own one and, you know, are looking to learn more about it and possibly modify the car. I have a few ideas with the car coming up. I definitely want to do some sort of driving review. I've never done that before. You know, kind of give a true raw driving experience of like what this car is like to drive while I'm driving the car. You know, do like the 5 things I like about it, 5 things I don't like. You know, definitely another sound video, because that's one of my favorite parts of this car, is the glorious V8 sound that it makes. And so I think it's really due for time-wise for another sound video and a, you know, dynamic sound video while the car is driving. So I'm going to stop rambling. I'm going to wrap up the video. Of course, if you guys liked today's video, definitely give it a thumbs up. And if you like the content, definitely subscribe for more, because there's a lot more C55 videos coming, and there's more go-kart build videos coming, all sorts of fun stuff related to cars and things that have 4 wheels and go fast. So thank you guys so much for tuning in today, and I am signing off, and I will see you guys in the next video.